Welcome to Lead Live, reminding you of your personal genius and how you think in order to actualize what you desire.
Hello, hello, hello. It's an honor to be here today with you. And wherever you're at on the planet, we value you, appreciate you, and that's why we have Lead Live. LEAD stands for Leadership Excellence and Achievement on Demand. We firmly believe that each one of us benefits most when we're the CEO of our lives. We demonstrate remarkable gifts that we are born with and the talents we develop over time that makes a remarkable difference, not only for ourselves as individuals, ideally for our families, the communities in which we reside, society and humanity more broadly. Today's topic is a very important topic, and it touches upon so many aspects of life for all of us on the planet. And yet, we're going to focus more locally on this particular country, the United States of America, and then focus even more narrowly, but then reveal how this so-called narrow focus is ubiquitous, and that is the art of activism. And the more I looked at some of these remarkable photos that you actually pieces of work, art, illuminations of greatness from our guest today, I thought we should have had a subtitle: Black Girls and Women in America. Well, we are going to use that subtitle in part. Yet the person I asked to come back on, he's been here before, and he's a remarkable historian, although he's not taught it as being historian by himself, but I revere him as a historian. His name is Milton Bowen. He was born and raised in Oakland, California in 1967. He received his associate's degree in commercial arts from the United States Armed Forces while listed in the Army. This gentleman has exhibited in shows throughout the United States, including in the California African American Museum, Los Angeles, Avisca Fine Arts Gallery, Atlanta, Georgia, National Black Fine Art Show in New York, UC Berkeley in Berkeley, California. I can share much more. He worked, I would say, nonstop. He lives his art. He's creating all the time. His work has been reviewed in numerous publications, not only within the state of California, outside the state of California, and he is going to continue to make a remarkable difference in not only adults' lives, and you'll have a sense of some of those individuals in a moment, yet also the lives of increasingly more youth, so they understand their capacity to do much more than what they may think the system demands of them or even constrains them to some degree. So Milton's work within the education system in particular includes lecturing at over 24 universities and college campuses, serving as artist and resident in over 6 Northern California school districts, and acting as spokesperson for Sacramento Mayor, Arts and Education Partnership, and John F. Kennedy Center for Performing Arts, Any Given Child. And the mayor that I omitted is Mayor Kevin Johnson's Art and Education Partnership. His artwork has also been used as a course of study on the Harlem Renaissance at Cornell University. Milton strongly believes that his art can educate as well as decorate. And I know that from personal experience, as I'm honored to have 2 pieces of his work. His work can be found in the private collection of the San Francisco 49ers, the Brown-Forman Corporation, Michael Jordan, Tavis Smiley, Charles Barkley, LeBron James. I can go on. Milton currently lives in a beautiful area with his adoring wife, who I look forward to meeting in the future in Alabama. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And he has a legacy of living in San Francisco and the Northern California area. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Jed to bring Milton into the studio. The Art of Activism. Hello, Mr. How
How are
are
you?
you?
I'm fine, Dr. Webb. First, let me say thank you for having me on the show again. It is truly an honor to be here and share this, especially uh, this month, this time as we
Mm,
celebrate Women's History Month, because you are a remarkable woman.
mm, my honor, my honor. And I believe for one to see a remarkable person, they're able to see a remarkable person. And yes, this is Women's History Month. I like to say Women's Her Story Month,
Yeah.
and intentionally, because there's so many stories that we have yet to illuminate, and yet you have spent the time as a artist, as a gentleman, as a remarkable historian to research the lives of a lot of Black women, a lot of women, a lot of African American women, and we're going to illuminate some of those works of art, if you will. And thanks to Jet in the background. In a moment, we're going to bring it up as a kind of a slide presentation. But as we do that, I want to begin by asking you to share with us something that folks would not find in social media about you that really reveals the essence of who you are, or I should say, the essence of your vision for your life.
Well, I think the one thing that people don't find on social media is that they're always curious about why I sign my work Milton 510.
Mm,
And a lot of people just assume when they read through my bio that it's because I was born and raised in Oakland, California, or the Bay Area. When actuality, I mean, there is some truth to that 510 being Oakland's area code, but it wasn't always 510. When I was born, Oakland's area code was actually 415. But the reason I sign all of my artwork Milton 510 is because I'm actually the fifth boy in a family of 10 children. I'm the fifth boy and the 10th
wow.
child. So there was five boys, five girls. So I'm actually the fifth son and the 10th child. I use it as a symbolic gesture of thank you to my family because,
Mm,
growing up in East Oakland, especially during the time in which I grew up, um, the path to becoming a creative or a fine artist, uh, it just would seem like it would be, not possible.
mm,
But, you know, regardless of any obstacles that were put before me, regardless of the, unique situations that my life has taken, my family is pretty much have been my support system and my rock. And the only
mm.
reason I am where I am today is because of a strong family unit that has helped nurture me, protect me, rescue me, and help me get to this point to where I am today.
Wonderful. That is awesome. That you're able to give, to honor your family, and that they chose to honor you in helping to elevate you to where you're at right now. And the brief bio that I shared really doesn't hit at all the different, I should call them cornerstones of who I uh, observe you to be. I remember the first time I met you, you presented some information, and I don't think it was part of Black History Month per se, yet it was on Black history. And you were talking to young people and older folks, folks older than me in their 80s. We were convened, I think, in the art gallery. And you just spoke from your heart. You had some of your work presented, and people like me were a bit overwhelmed by the magnificence and the simplicity and the elegance and the deep, reflection that your work inspired. And you started talking, and I was like, wow. And I don't think you heard a pin drop in the room, because what you did is you not only shared what the work was about, you indicated how you research history, not just what we see in the books, not what we hear, but you went and did some primary research so that you can get some of the truths that are not out there and then have it reflected, embedded in the spirit of your work, and not only in the spirit, the actual visual representation of the work. And then you went and talked about the history of Blacks in this part of the continent, the continent, and also in the context of the world. And you then went further to inspire folks to find their own understanding of truth beyond just the rhetoric or the dogma that tends to be pervasive. And that was quite inspiring. So tell me, what inspired you to be who you are, in addition to your family's love, unconditional love and support?
Well, I mean, it that's a really good question because becoming an artist for me was somewhat of a dualistic uh event of circumstances.
Hmm.
Just like every young kid growing up in the pretty much the early 70s, the late 60s area, there wasn't really a lot of representation in terms of the arts on first glance. And the reason why I say on first glance is because when we think about art, we typically just think about art in the fine art context, the European
Mm,
masters, the white glove set, the pristine institutions. But art is really all around us. Everything is an element of art or creativity to it. So me growing up watching, a 70s sitcom like Good Times, people wouldn't think of that in terms of fine art, but because I actually thought JJ, the lead character in the sitcom, who was an artist, I thought he actually made all of that artwork. And in
mm,
reality, the work was created by a really gifted artist, award-winning artist named Ernie Barnes, who was a professional football player, majored in studio art, and then he got his artwork, collected by the producer of the show. So during that time, we wouldn't have looked at that situation as being considered fine art,
mm,
but fine art is rooted in it.
mm.
So coming from a background like that, and then me just growing up, hip hop is just being born as a creative art form. Doing graffiti, I got in trouble doing it. I actually tagged the Oakland police car and in my juvenile mediation hearing, a mentor who worked at the East Oakland Youth Development Center at the time, his name was Robert Collier, spoke on my behalf because he was also a teacher at the Renaissance School of Arts.
Mm,
This located in North Oakland, right across the street from the California College of Art, and they got me into the art school, and so that was the first time art rescued me.
mm,
And this was just a man who happened to be there in a capacity as different from the school itself, but he was there because of the EOYDC. Saw me and my mother uh listening to the conversation that she was having with me about making good choices and decisions, and look at where we were, and he was like, man, maybe I can do something to help this young man. And he did, because he asked my mother, he said, well, can I speak to the mediator on your behalf? She said, well, somebody needs to speak to him. So that was the first time. And so I've just always felt a tremendous obligation, because there have been different times in my life on this journey to becoming an artist that people have who are not blood related to me, who have like stepped in and have made a
mm,
huge contribution
mm,
in either helping me see something, or speaking on my behalf to open a door.
mm,
Because you know I left after I graduated high school, I got a full ride scholarship to the San Francisco Institute of Art and the California College of Arts and Crafts. They've recently dropped the craft from it.
that's right.
But I took the scholarship to the California College of Art, which, because I was familiar with it. I mean, I had already taken classes on their campus. It was right across the street from my high school, but I only did 1 year, and I dropped out after my freshman year because I come from a military family,
Mm,
and because of sibling peer pressure of listening to all of their stories about it just sounded so adventurous and
mm,
exotic to me. So I actually left art school and joined the military. My One of my brothers was actually my army recruiter,
mm,
and he put me into the service. And but I actually, through that situation, that's the first time I was ever collected by a museum. And
mm,
and during my time in service in the Army, I was collected by 2 museums. I was collected by the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Museum located on Fort Bragg, and the Don F. Pratt Memorial Museum that's located at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Just doing artwork that was about the history of my unit's activities during World War II in Vietnam.
Hmm.
So by doing, I've always had a love for history because I've always been intrigued and some would say even excited about the characters of art history.
Mm.
So when you start to learn about individuals like, Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, Raphael and Donatello, the Ninja Turtles, it, it becomes very exciting because they have very compelling stories. So I think, that if we compare that to early on, one of the things that reminds me deeply of my mother, who is no longer with me, but she's always with me in spirit. And I would basically scribble to her words inside the encyclopedias and dictionaries.
Hmm.
Now, I know that word might sound different for some of your audience, but for those who are of a certain age, encyclopedias are books with information in them that actually was on a bookshelf well before Google.
Yes. Yes.
So she would say, "Well, Milton, if you destroy or deface or make cartoon characters of the individuals in our encyclopedias, then I can't use them to successfully help your brothers and sisters with their homework."
Mm,
And planting that little seed
mm,
of intrigue made me want to know what that information was. So
mm,
so soon as I was able to learn how to read and understand, I was reading dictionaries and encyclopedias. So this love for history, to me, I think comes from that.
mm,
And so, although I tell people all of the time, I'm not a historian, but I love history. But and it just shows through. And the reason I picked history as a primary topic that I wanted to deal with in my work is because I felt that it's a topic that you can never exhaust.
mm.
I'm never going to have an artist block because I deal in history, and there's always an aspect because history is not the past. History is the past, the present that is going to dictate the future. So there's always an element
Mm.
combined with the history that gives me a platform for creativity.
Powerful, very helpful. So there's something about your work that really evidence a one of your central priorities, which is truth telling. Right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
I love to be corrected when I'm wrong, and so the truth telling is really about the history of Black in America. Correct?
Yes.
And so much of your art, not only does it honor uh, Blacks, historical Black folks who've been here, no longer here physically, folks who were here physically, and those of us who will be here in the future who have yet to even be imagined, except for in your mind in terms of art as a way to help us expose the truth and experience truths. And part of your focus has been around that the United States, America, has made promises it has not kept.
Yes.
And there are different genres trying to hold America accountable for what it has placed or put down in paper,
Yes.
beginning, and not only, but beginning with the Constitution. Can you speak to that briefly as we begin to bring up some of your work?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, this is a really an issue that I'm extremely passionate about. America has a very unique history, and I say that because even though we have moments where we celebrate certain specific aspects of America's history, like Black History Month, like Women's History Month, um, just because we take a segment or a section of a portion of our nation's history and pay homage to it and celebrate it doesn't diminish the fact or negate the fact that it is still America's history. So when we start to look at America's history in its totality, we run up against two things. We run up against this idealized version of America's history,
Mm.
which is all the time not rooted in fact. It's more myth and sensationalism than it is actual fact. But America operates or is governed on a document. This is the unique thing about America that sets America apart from other free countries around the world. Our nation's constitution is one of the most unique documents ever constructed. But in that document, it was left open for interpretation. And by having a document that is a living, breathing document, and when people say the Constitution is a living, breathing document, what they are saying is that the core of it is, quote unquote, the essence, the fact that it is malleable, the fact that it can be manipulated, the fact that it could be morphed, the fact that it could be added to and subtracted, leaves it in a level of existence, meaning that it is alive, that is not stagnant. Because on paper, African Americans were not included in the fabric of the nation, technically as human beings. African Americans have always been included in the document, but they were used as a clever math component. Most people have heard that African Americans are referred to as 3/5 of a human being in the Constitution. And we take that assumption to mean that we were only 3/5 of a human. In actuality, it's even a little bit more sinister than that, because that clause is based on the fact that it wasn't even acknowledging African Americans. It was saying that white Southern planters, people of aristocracy, they got credit for your blackness. That so every white man who owned slaves actually got 3/5 of a percentage of each one of those slaves added to their value so they could make up for the discrepancy in population with the North. So it's a math problem. It's not even about the humanity of me as a black man or black woman being considered this lesser than. They just had to give a value for a math equation, so that spoke volumes to even how they viewed us in terms of an actual numerical value, which becomes the quote unquote dismissal of humanity. So when we look at this document, that's just on the black folk side. You can't find the word woman written in the Constitution. So that's an uphill battle and struggle all to itself as well, too, as we sit here celebrating Women's History Month. So now, the simple fact that we have to go and amend something to acknowledge individuals, that's where the intrigue starts. And so, these are the elements that, I looked at in terms of, well, who has really used their creativity, used their platform, used their voices to attempt to hold America accountable. And we must start first, with individuals like Frederick Douglass, of course, Harriet Tubman, you got Ida B. Wells, you got Sojourner Truth, all of these individuals. It doesn't matter in what aspect or what era or what generation you come through in terms of America's history. There has always been activists. There has always been creatives. There are people, and nobody probably typically would look at Ida B. Wells as being a creative, but she was one of the most amazing journalists that we have ever produced. Just like Dr. King. I mean, who would you consider Dr. King to be a creative? Well, nobody used words, in my opinion, more creatively than that man. You know what I'm saying? Now, we can't give him all the credit for all of the speeches because he had help in speechwriters, but nobody could take away. He was the person who got up and delivered those wonderful oratories to us. So when I look at history, I like to tell young people that you got so many mentors at your fingertips. And you actually have the technology today to get their mentorship firsthand, uninterrupted, through YouTube, through all of these different aspects of video and sharing. And you have a tiny computer in your pocket. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, why not use that to gain information, knowledge, and inspiration from some of the people who have actually shifted opinion and have changed the world.
Mhm. As we transition into your work, I'm not even certain how to frame this question. As I was thinking about today, I was thinking about Vice President Kamala Harris. I was
Yeah.
thinking about Supreme Court Justice nominee, is it Kadaji or Katanji? Katanji Brown Jackson. I hope I'm not screwing up her name. She's due a great deal of respect for her legacy and that she's already created and to come. When I think about these two women, really at the epicenter of the shift that we want to see happen across this country and beyond, where women are very well represented in all spaces, diverse women, and certainly Black and African American women. What do you feel when I say those two names in the scheme of things of art and activism?
Well, for me, the first thing that I would say would come to mind for me
No,
is,
I said, what do you feel? Now, what comes to mind?
oh, well, what do I feel? I mean, I
Mhm.
feel an immense amount of pride.
Mm,
Um, that's the first feeling that you get,
mm,
is this immense sense of
mm,
pride. And I say it from the perspective of the simple fact that I lost my father when I was 8 years old. I was primarily raised by a single parent. My mother, with the assistance of my two grandmothers and my five sisters, they were the ones who really were the nurturers for me. I mean, my brothers were military people. They were athletes and military individuals. So the minute they turned 17, they took my parents' permission and they all went into the service. And we're talking about career servicemen. So, primarily me being the youngest in the family, I was pretty much raised by a cohort of matriarchs and Black women.
mm,
Now, so when I see, you know, two Black women in my lifetime ascend to levels that historically we have never obtained. And, if people are paying close attention, I'm passionate about history. So when you think about that, we're talking 2022 in our nation's history, and we are just embarking on the first Black woman to sit on the Supreme Court. We have the first female vice president in our nation's history, and she is a woman of color. She is a Black woman.
mhm,
When you think about these accomplishments, the first thing for me, and I'm not speaking for anybody else, but for me, it's a flooding of immense pride.
mm,
But it does bring something to mind. And what it brings to mind is Shirley Chisholm's quote.
mm.
If you don't have a seat at the table, bring a folding chair.
Exactly.
Because because it's an ongoing struggle and you have to make your place. Sometimes you got to make your place. And when I look at what is unfolding in front of us, I mean, just last night we have President Joe Biden's State of the Union address. What 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 some people might not have paid close significance to was, in our nation's history, this is the first time the
Both
pres
women,
the president of the United States has two women over his shoulder. That has
flanked by
never
both of them.
that has
Mhm,
never happened before.
mhm,
So, those moments to me are uniquely special. And being an artist, I pay close attention to those little nuances because they become very inspirational um, nuggets that you hold on to. So,
mm. Powerful. Well, now I'd like for the viewing audience to take a look at this work. So if we look at this, tell us what we're looking at.
well, this piece this is a quiet tribute to Norman Rockwell. Some people might know the famous painting that Norman Rockwell produced of Ruby Bridges, who was the first African American elementary school student to integrate an all white school in New Orleans. So Norman Rockwell did a very powerful painting where Ruby Bridges is being ushered into her school by U.S. Marshals. Um, and it was very controversial at the time when he done it. So I like to use Norman Rockwell's rendition of Ruby Bridges but I do it in more of a silhouette form. But the painting has a simple statement. Even Norman Rockwell understood Black Lives Matter. And if you know Norman Rockwell in his career, you know he was. I think he should be considered, one of the most important American artists of all time. But he kind of gets put in a subcategory of only being looked at as an illustrator because of the wonderful covers of the Saturday Evening Post that he did, which was basically the nuclear white family. This pristine unblemished image of white America. But Norman Rockwell was very savvy. I mean, he was an activist in his own right. And that Ruby Bridges painting is probably one of the most powerful pieces of political art ever produced. And the Obamas actually had the original on loan from the Norman Rockwell Museum on display in the White House during both their terms.
And then you used it here to really hone in on education.
This work that we're looking at now comes from a collection that I called The Art of Education. And you can see that we got the transcribe of the preamble to the Constitution, We the People. But if you look closely in the top left, there's a stencil word that says little. Then you have the word rock in red, and then you have the number 9. This represents the Little Rock Nine, who the 9 young African-American students who had to integrate Central High in Little Rock, Arkansas. The one thing about that struggle that gets, somewhat glossed over is that entire school year and what those 9 children had to endure, the pushback, the hate, the bigotry was so intense that the following year, which we don't hear about as frequently in our history text, is a simple fact that the superintendent of the schools shut them down to end, integration. So, sometimes we got to go beyond the sound bite of the moment to get the totality of what actually happened when we have tried to push for change in this country.
Here's the third in the series that we're sharing, and this just complements what you just conveyed.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just saying, true education, it isn't how much you have committed to memory or how much you know. It's taking what you have learned and using it, to change for the betterment of all humanity. So, when Dr. King and Malcolm X and Medgar Evers and John F. Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy, when they were trying to be beacons of change, they weren't just trying to change for Black folks and white folks. They were trying to change for all folks, and you find, during the era of the 60s, when some would argue was one of the especially 1968 being one of the most volatile years we have on record in terms of taking leaders, lives who were only trying to be beacons of change and equality. That should tell us all, where we are in terms of humanity as a society.
I love this picture of Nikki. Tell us about Nikki.
Well, one of the interesting things about Nikki Giovanni, and I've had the pleasure of meeting her. So this is a personal story. This is not, taken from hearsay. Nikki Giovanni actually has Thug Life tattooed on her. She was so moved by Tupac, who I actually had the pleasure of knowing and having a friendship with. She was so inspired by him as an individual and a creative person, and then seeing his tragic death, she got a Thug Life tattoo, because Thug Life is not metaphorically about being a thug. Thug Life is metaphorically about not being afraid to upset the apple cart. Sometimes you got to be a thug to generate change.
Okay, praise the Lord. Lorde. Tell us about this American poet and much more. She self-described what? Black
Well,
lesbian mother, warrior, poet.
yeah. So, the reason I love Audre Lorde, I mean, Audre Lorde probably has some of the most, golden quotes you're ever gonna find. If you need, if you're feeling down at any time and you want something that's gonna like give your self esteem a booster shot, Audre Lorde is a go to.
You make me think about when she has written next to her on a board, green, they call it a whiteboard, but a green board, chalk. Women are powerful and dangerous.
Yes, yes, so just like her, and then we're going to get to another magnificent woman in this slide presentation too, who I think on a certain degree I look at them as the beauty of being unapologetic.
Mm,
So that's what I take from
mm. Okay. Many of us think we know this woman
them.
because of her, oh my goodness, her legacy. She was born in 1924 and she just transitioned last year in January. American actress that really she was much more than someone who was in Roots, who was in who was did the leading role of autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, was in The Help, on Broadway with noted remarkable folks, honored like all these women, honored in different ways by different people, including Oprah Winfrey at the Legends Ball. Tell us about this woman. It's taken for granted.
Yeah, well, I think Cicely Tyson is like one of America's, biggest unsung heroes. Um, just the resume that you've just, listed on her and her accomplishments. But the reason I chose this particular photo of Cicely Tyson is uniquely important because we know the roles that she played. But the one aspect of this particular photo is Cicely Tyson was probably on record the first very well known African American actress to go natural with her hair publicly. And sh this is firsthand account information. This, like I said, she has been quoted and on video of talking about the reaction to when she actually did it and how it cost her a measure of celebrity to a certain degree and pushback because of her choosing to change her hairstyle. Just I just want all your listeners to let that soak in for a minute.
Okay, I remember meeting this woman back in the early 80s. I had no idea who she was until she opened her mouth. And I was at the Katati Cabaret. I don't even know if any of the viewers even know where that place is. I don't think it exists anymore. In a little town called Katati, north of San Francisco. And I lived just down the street. And I went there one day and she was to perform. I had no idea who she was. And wow. I mean, her presence was beyond just a physical presence. Clearly, I was experiencing a powerful being. And then when she opened her mouth, it's like she shut down the whole building. The building could have collapsed because of the strength of her voice. Etta James.
The incomparable Etta James. The one thing that I find interesting is this: when we earlier we talked about young people. The one thing that's funny is like when the film Cadillac Records came out and Beyonce played Etta James, young people actually thought that that was just a fictional character, not understanding that Cadillac Records, the film, is rooted in actual history. That those icons that were being represented, they were all on the Chess label, which is still today considered one of the best blues catalog labels of all time in the world. Those musicians have influenced people like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, but young people didn't know that history. They thought that this was a fictional movie like Idlewild or something that was just, taken and constructed about the Black experience, but it wasn't rooted in anything factual. But Etta James, you know, as an entertainer, was not just legendary, she was groundbreaking. You know, she helped blues cross over from what at the time was considered race music, race records, to mainstream popular music.
That's right.
Also with the assistance of Chuck Berry on the same label. So it's like, man, when you start to learn about these people and those stories and then just how deep that history runs, you know, that's why her crown is done in blue.
Okay, this woman. Wow. Yeah. Tell us about this woman.
So Katherine Johnson, and I like to bring her up, you know, with my students, and even like when I do art
And
talks.
when you said earlier, just do the math, made me think of her right away. Go ahead.
So yeah, so you know, like even when I go do art talks and lectures on the university level, I ask people, I say, well, you know, well, how much do you know about, you know, quote unquote, America and you know the space race, like what America did to get to outer space, and like who are the players and what happened. And man, you get people start saying all different aspects of what they know and what NASA did and all of that. And then I always just hit them with a simple question. I say, okay, so who did the math? Because most people didn't know of her story until, you know, Disney came out with Hidden Figures. So, you know, that film shed light on three remarkable black women who were basically the cornerstone and the backbone, the infrastructure of what it took for America to put people into outer space.
They did the math.
They did they did the math. And here's the interesting thing about their story. So even if you've seen the film, the interesting thing about the movie is that these women were called calculators.
When you said that, I'm getting chills because they were not deemed professionals, they were deemed instruments.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I actually have tears that go to the back of my eyes and they want to come out. If someone told me I would tear up like this, I mean, literally, I'm getting a little bit of a headache because it speaks to the reality of our historical experiences and, quite frankly, depending upon where we go, our current experiences. And if we don't watch it, our future experiences for our young girls, and boys. We're talking about girls and women right now who influence the rest of humanity. But please speak more on that. Because I don't know that everybody got what you just said.
So the whole this whole idea when we talk about gender equality and you know equal pay for women, she basically solved America's biggest equation when we're talking about space exploration. She figured it out. And initially, she couldn't even be recognized as the individual who did the math.
Mm-hmm.
She was reduced to what some would consider today an inanimate object. They were referred to as calculators and then given no credit for what they calculated. So you label them one thing and then strip them of that label all at the same time. This is like a layered, deep, metaphorical thing. But one of the things that I bring up is like, you know, when people look at like my entire catalog, and I do these different series, there's a series of work that is ongoing that I do when I look at documentation in America. Like you saw in the Art of Education pieces, we saw briefly that I used the heading of the preamble to the Constitution. When you look at deeper examination into those works of art, in the background of those compositions, I have the front cover of the Supreme Court brief for Brown versus the Board of Education. I'll have an insurance policy of enslaved Africans. See, the one thing is this: I tell young people when I work with them on these cultural historical projects is that even during our nation's most horrific time, which was the enslavement of free Africans here in the Americas, and it's important that I phrase it that way.
Mhm.
Our ancestors were not just slaves. I mean that gives America a pass. Our ancestors were free Africans that were enslaved in the Americas. And to that end, they were insured. So I always ask young people, what is insurance for? And you only insure something that has to have an intrinsic value. You don't insure things that you deem insignificant. You don't
Mhm.
insure a glass of milk. You don't insure a loaf of bread, but you insure those things that come with intrinsic value.
Mhm.
So I say, if we know our ancestors were so valuable that they needed to be insured, why are we walking around today thinking that we are less than or carry no value?
Hmm. I'll let that rest. Raisin in the Sun. Oh my goodness. We know this phenomenal woman. In fact, there was a Lorraine Hansberry Theater in San Francisco that I belonged to in terms of membership for years, thanks to dear loved ones who were members before I um, or myself. But speak to this American playwright and writer, and actually, definitely activist, like all the previous women and the women to be revealed.
Lorraine Hansberry was gangster. I mean, that's the best way I can put it. I mean, Lorraine Hansberry was sitting in meetings. You know what I'm saying? She was sitting in meetings with the president. Her and James Baldwin are two individuals that I think today people probably are more intrigued in doing more research and investigating their legacies today
Mhm.
um, than they were back when they were actually making a huge impact and challenging what it was to live this black experience in America. And I'm glad you brought up the Lorraine Hansberry Theater.
Mhm.
The first time she got put on my radar was a field trip that we took. I think it was like in the eighth grade to San Francisco from the art school, and we got a chance to go to the Palace of Legion of Honor, the Lorraine Hansberry Theater. We would go to the De Young. We'd go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We'd go to all of these places, and I was like, and then when somebody told me that that theater was named after a black woman, I was like, nah, I never knew that a black person had something named after them. I mean, it was like, I'm like, whoa, it just blew me away. And A Raisin and Son, you know, oh, it speaks for itself. I mean, once you say Raisin and Son, it's enough said. I mean, it has been, produced and performed countless times, turned into television, motion picture status. You know, it's just remarkable what these individuals were able to create as creatives. And and we ain't even talked about the content.
Oh, wow. The content was off the charts. And and so for those who may not know these remarkable and some to some degree in their own right, humble and unassuming women, but really were about the business of being authentic. They were leading by example. They weren't waiting for someone to say, wake up and do. They had a vision. Even if their vision wasn't clear initially, they were driven. They were had a burning desire to make a difference. And they were unwavering all the way through their transition from this physical existence. And so I honor you, Milton, for choosing to honor these and so many other women, and of course, men, women who are at the cornerstone and the foundation for why we are where we're at now. And those of you who are women who are looking, please leverage these stories, leverage their works in order to remind yourself of your own inherent genius and God given, the Great Spirit given capacity to exceed even your highest imaginings. So break through whatever's in your way. Leverage, leverage, leverage. Get to a place where you can look back at your life, whether it's 35 years or it's 50 years or it's 100 years, and say, listen, I did it. I gave it all. I spent it all. And that's what these women were all about.
And one interesting thing before we go to the next
Hmm.
individual is, she was taken from us way too soon.
Yeah.
And she is her story is also a reminder to me that,
She's only
create
35,
yeah,
34, 35.
we got to create now while we can, because tomorrow's never promised to us.
That's right.
And she did a piece of work that has now become legacy work, but who knows what she would have been able to do had she been able to live into her 50s and 60s, like some of our other
Mhm.
greats get the opportunity to do. But that wasn't afforded to her, but she still has left a mark on society and the world around.
Yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt. And this woman, born in 1867, she lived until she was what, 19 in 1919? Uh,
Yeah.
but she left a legacy that people are still leveraging.
Yeah, I mean, what I think it was Netflix who just did the little docu series on her with Octavia
Mhm,
Spencer. I think played her,
mhm.
uh, Madam C.J. Walker.
American entrepreneur and much, much more.
Much more than that. But I'm gonna be brief on her because
Mhm.
for her, I have a question for every all your entire viewing and listening audience. Where are her beauty colleges?
Mm.
We're talking about a woman who had
Mhm,
entrepreneurial instinct like
mhm,
no other.
mhm,
But where are her
mhm,
cosmetology and beauty schools?
mm,
Where is the Madam C.J. Walker University of Beauty and Health?
mm,
Where is that at? When we talk about legacy and we talk about black hair as black wealth, well, who are we allowing to own our own narrative and our cultural strength? I'm not going to get biblical today, but we talked about there's a man in the Bible that we could talk about how his strength was taken from him when his hair was cut. So
mm,
we're allowing other people to basically take our strength
mm,
if we want to get metaphoric
mm,
about the power of our hair and the value of it. So if black hair is black wealth, where is Madam C.J. Walker's universities or school of beauty and health? That would be
mm,
my question to your audience.
mm. Okay. And we've already talked about this brilliant woman. Here we go. In our own backyard, Alice Walker,
Alice
American
Walker.
novelist, definitely at her core, an activist.
But you know what's funny, Dr. Webb? When I talk to people about Alice Walker, there are some people that don't even know Alice Walker wrote The Color Purple.
Oh, wow.
And it just
Wow.
my heart just it's just like, oh,
Mm.
you have to be
They
kidding
don't
me.
know that she's a Pulitzer Prize for fiction.
I
They
have
don't know all these women, just accolades. We could spend several hours, but let's stay put on Alice.
I have some young people who
Mhm,
believe or think because of the way marketing and social media works and celebrity, they honestly believe that Oprah Winfrey is responsible for The Color Purple. And I
mm,
was like, but you know, you have to go read Alice Walker. It was like, so
mhm,
as much as we rely on technology today,
mhm,
the one thing that I always do when I engage any group of young people is to try to get them to understand that their cell phone, i.e., computer, pocket computer, can take them on journeys that they have yet to explore, and to not take everything from face value. The great comedian Paul Mooney has a joke, but it's really a profound statement more than a joke. And he says that, well, every I'm not going to use the the derogatory version of it, but he says, well, they believe every black person is an entertainer.
mm,
So ask yourself,
mm,
if you're an
mm,
entertainer, then who
mm,
are you entertaining?
mm,
What role are you playing? So this notion that we only can get excited or we can only respect or pay homage to those who get in front of us and give us some sense of comedy relief or some sense of entertainment relief, we're shooting our own self in the foot, because And I tell them, even, you know, it, I don't quote unquote like, you know, uh talk down upon or question the information that they have, because you got to meet young people where they are. So when I hear these young people who don't know the totality of the history, what I tell them is I say, okay, so if Oprah created the color purple, did Oprah come up with the idea? Because I know that's going to lead them if they do the research. And I'll tell them,
Mm,
take out your phone. To find, you know, when did Oprah write the screenplay? So I take them down that path. And then they'll say, "Oh, Mr. Milton, wait a minute. No, Oprah is just playing a role in a, you know, that would." And so now they've discovered that information on their own.
mm,
And those who are intellectually curious, they stay down that path. Some people will dismiss it and move on because, you know, Nicki Minaj got a new CD out or Cardi B is number one on the radio. But for those who you just have opened the door to Alice Walker, they'll stay there and visit for a while.
mm,
And that becomes the most important thing.
mm. The power of love is
Yeah.
what I love that you've illuminated here. Fear is real, but so is love.
That's a direct quote from Alice Walker.
Mhm, mhm. I had the honor of meeting her when I lived in Berkeley, where she lived, one of her homes, and her grace and informal predisposition was just as clear, us both going into a local Target or wherever we were, as it was when she was on television being interviewed so much. Uh, just a very unassuming sister. And then we have this sister. Oh my God. I'll never forget her being interviewed on not CNN, what was it? PBS. And she turned that interviewer, will go unnamed, uh, around. He asked a very derogatory question, but his privilege led him to ask that question. Why don't you write about other people other than Black people? And I'll never forget the clarity, the calmness, the sincerity, and the exacting nature of her response. Anyone who witnessed that would say, "Wow, that was power." She didn't have to raise her voice. She didn't have to get up. She was just kind of calmly gave him a response, made him look at himself, I'm sure, and said, "What the heck? Why did I ask that dumb question?" But speak to this woman.
The mighty Toni Morrison. The mighty Toni Morrison. Man.
And do people know that she wrote Beloved?
Well, see, the thing is this right here, and I'm going to use one of her direct quotes to answer your question.
Okay.
It's time for Black folks to have another reading revolution.
Mm, yes.
Toni Morrison is on record for, you know, being a champion for literacy.
Mhm.
And she talks about, she was one of the first, you know, Black authors. My sisters love this woman. And a lot of these women, that's how I was introduced to them. You know, I have a different, unique story for Lorraine Hansberry because of the whole theater and our field trips. But the majority of these women I got introduced to because my sisters did projects or read books or, you know, those type of things. And I didn't know, you know, being as young as I was, how years later, you know, and me doing investigation and research for certain projects, how I would come around their work and keep revisiting their work on all different levels from different aspects. The interesting thing about Toni Morrison, though, is like, you know, she's always been like this champion for literature. And she talked about how with the advent of certain aspects of entertainment, how we've put down, you know, the physical book. And she talked about the power of being able to hold a book in your hand
Mhm.
and feel the pages and highlight the passages and have that as a source of reference, and how it stays with you in a different capacity than
Yes.
just seeing something or hearing something. Um and the one thing about Toni Morrison, when she became a publisher, and a lot of people don't know that she was a publisher, but when she became a publisher, she produced a book. And I tell all creatives, this is a book that you got to have in your arsenal. It's
Mm,
called The Black Book.
mm,
and it wasn't a popular book when she put it out, and the publishing company was like, well, what really is this? Like, it's not a novel, it's not a piece of fiction, but it's all these different archived images and accounts of the history of blacks in the Americas in its totality.
Wow.
We're talking about advertisement ads for Darky toothpaste. We're talking about uh the information on the most popular postcards in America, which were the images of people being lynched. Those were the number one selling postcards in America at their time during the Jim Crow era. They actually put lynchings on postcards. You could mail a postcard of a lynching from Alabama to Oklahoma to New York to Washington or to California. It was an image of someone being murdered. And they were the most popular images in America. Toni Morrison in the Black Book breaks all of this down. She is an activist, artist supreme.
Nobel Prize in Literature, Presidential Freedom, Medal of Freedom, and so much more.
But
We're touching the surface, folks. We're touching literally the surface. I was dating a gentleman who's very good friends of hers, who won't mention any names, and he wanted me to go and spend some time with her. I didn't have the time, or whatever it was, the wherewithal to stop and slow down. My honoring of her is more than just being able to reveal your remarkable honoring of her. It's also to encourage us to go beyond the obvious. The obvious is what we think we're experiencing based upon our eyes, what we see, what we're tasting, what we're feeling, what we're hearing, those sensory faculties are important to safeguard us, to get us to one destination to another. Yet, in fact, they're so woefully inadequate. If we can go beyond what appears to be the case and get to a higher level using our mental tools, using our subconscious mind, oh my God, where we will go is where artists go. Phenomenal artists like Milton goes all the time. And I'm certain his wife, who's an artist too, goes all the time. That's the genius of each one of us when we allow ourselves to tap into it. The conscious mind, powerful. All those mental tools, including perception, will, imagination. I'm missing several. Intuition, will. I'm missing two. But in any event, and then the subconscious mind, which drives our behavior 95 to 99% of the time, every single day. And we think we're driven by our intellectual mind, our thinking, our decision making mind, when in fact we're driven by the emotional mind, which is that heart, mind, heart, brain, and much more connection. So I just want people to realize when you're touching base with these artists and many others, women, remarkable Black women, remarkable folks who chose to be authentic and didn't think they were fundamentally only based in the US, they saw themselves beyond even the planet. Not necessarily that they talked about it. Well, people like Alice could speak more explicitly about it because she chose to. But they saw themselves as something bigger, something greater, part of consciousness to shift things, right, Milton? To shift things in a way that actually serves the greatest good.
If I could piggyback on a statement that you just said, because as an artist, some people, when we view art or when we think of art, and even artists, a lot of artists think about artists in their own personal capacity. But the computer is based on the human brain, and one of the functions of a computer is that if you leave it on too long, it goes to sleep. The computer doesn't turn off; it's just in this suspended mode. And what I want everybody to understand is that everything around you is art, like we said earlier. Everything is art and everything is communicating to you, because you can fall asleep with the television on and you'll wake up and realize that you are not rejuvenated. You are actually sluggish. And the reason you are is because your brain was absorbing everything that was on that television while you slept. That's the reason why you'll be in your car and you'll have a craving for some food that you didn't even see the commercial for. Or a song will be stuck in your head that you swear you didn't listen to, but you heard it while you were asleep. And your brain is going to recall that incident or that moment or that record all on its own because it is constantly working. Your brain does not turn off. So we know that we can speak without the spoken word. If I told all of your listening audience today without saying a word to say lead live, let's just do that for a second. On the count of three, I want everybody listening today to say lead live without saying a word. One, two, three. You said it and you heard it. So that's proof positive that we can speak without being spoken to, which means that everything around us is speaking to us, whether we understand the language or not.
And the power is to choose what you turn on and listen to, and what you choose to expose yourself to that causes you to feel a certain way. So,
They say you are what you eat, but you're also what you think.
mhm. And what you think directly affects your feeling, and your feelings directly affect and influence more your thinking than the reverse until you know how to change that. And that's what we're all about, is encouraging you to take responsibility, lead by example, be your best self, and leverage these women, leverage others, leverage the art that you've seen. Get to a place where you literally are in a better place than you can even imagine right now, because you're going to be paying it forward. As you do, people see. As you feel, people experience, because everything takes on a vibration, right, Milton?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, it's been my honor. We're 7 minutes over, and yet I do have one last question, and I just want you to sum it up in the way you want to. How do we ensure truth via history?
We have to be champions to protect it. So we just witnessed a variety of different women from all walks of life. As we close out Women's History Month on this particular segment of Lead Live, I want everybody to understand the best way to protect truth is to promote truth, because truth is truth and everything else will fall by the wayside. And the best way to protect truth is to promote it.
Hmm, I love that. I'll make this final note. I remember people saying, well, why don't you just tell people the truth? When it came to some real controversial matters. And my natural wiring is just to look at them, and I always did, and had some form of response that was akin to truth always sees the light of day. Misrepresentations may take a generation, may even just take a week. Misrepresentations are always revealed as just that. Be patient, be truthful, engage in a way that's authentic, and then people will be wired to believe your side of the story than someone else who comes on the scene and tries to deride or undermine you. The
And
real power, go ahead.
so when you think about this, I mean, when you said that, what immediately came to mind is a simple fact that, you know, so the death of Emmett Till, this 14-year-old
Oh,
boy who,
we lost most of what you just said. We were frozen for a moment.
okay, so I was saying
Mhm.
that, coming off of Black History Month, one of the most interesting, intriguing stories that I always examine is the death of the Emmett Till. The 14-year-old boy was killed in Money, Mississippi when he left Chicago to visit his grandparents and spend the summer with his cousins in Mississippi. It was alleged that he whistled at a white woman, and then he was taken from his grandfather's house and killed, and his body surfaced in the Tallahatchie River. The interesting thing about that is, like, it took over 50 years before the truth actually came out. Now, we can argue that we always knew what the truth was, but for the truth to actually come out, the woman who the whole story is fabricated around came out and said, that it never happened, that this little boy never even did what history has recorded him of doing. So just like you said, the history is always going to come out at some point.
With that note, folks, we honor you. Thank you for those who had an opportunity to view this live and provide comments. And I'm sorry I didn't take time to reveal all of your comments. And thank you, Andrew, for acknowledging us. And most importantly, be your best self. Enjoy life. Do what you can do to add value, make a difference. There's challenges all over the place, yet there's also opportunities all over the place. Opportunities for you to not only be your healthiest self, yet also for you to inspire that among all of us. So, with that, it's been an honor, always is. Hope to see you next week with Lead Live, Wednesday, noon Pacific Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or wherever you're at on the planet. Thank you for being here. Wado.